Good afternoon. We're going to take just a few seconds and let people load into the Zoom room, and we'll get started. Hello there. I'm Michelle Wagner with NAMI New Hampshire, and I work on the First Episode Psychosis Early Serious Mental Illness Initiative. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled New Hampshire Rapid Response 1 year later, Lessons, Updates 988, and Looking Ahead. This presentation is being recorded, and you'll be able to find it on the education page of onwardnh.org. In the next few days, you'll receive a follow-up email with links to both the survey and the recording. This is a Zoom webinar. Your camera and microphone are off. The Q&A feature is working, however, so please enter any questions you have there. My colleague Emily Huff and I will work to get your questions answered as best we can. With us today are three people who can help us discuss how our new mental health crisis system is working, and they can remind us about how and when to use it. We have with us today Eric Eason with Carelon Behavioral Health, formerly Beacon Health Options. We also have Al Carbonneau from Headrest and Kimberly Goldberg with Lakes Region Mental Health Center, where she works as the Director of Acute Services. We welcome you all. Eric, let's start with you. It was just over a year ago that New Hampshire developed the Rapid Response Access Point. Can you give us a little bit of that history and then share where we're at now?
Sure. For those of you who may be familiar with New Hampshire's 10-year mental health plan, that plan rolled out a number of years ago and was a response to what was recognized as the need to really corral resources and create a standardized plan for how we were going to meet the needs here in New Hampshire for folks who live with mental health concerns. And so as a part of that 10-year mental health plan, there were plans put into place to develop additional crisis resources. And this whole system that we're going to talk about today really grew out of that work. At some point prior to 2022, I actually didn't join this effort until that time, but prior to 2022, there was a lot of work done to lay the groundwork for what we have in place today. And as of January 1st, 2022, we did go live with this new system that has 24/7 access to phone, text, and chat support, as well as mobile crisis resources and some urgent appointment resources through the local mental health centers. So that's been kind of the progression. That means that we've now been in place for a year and 2 months as of today. And the system has developed significantly in that amount of time. The way that, as much planning as we did put into it all, obviously the day that we went live, we immediately started learning lessons and started adapting. That's one thing I want to kind of reiterate to anyone listening, is that this is a system in continued growth. And so it is intended to constantly evolve and develop as we better understand the needs of folks who are in crisis here in New Hampshire. So Carelon is one of the agencies involved in the service. If you've seen previous webinars, we previously were known as Beacon Health Options. We just recently had a name change, and we're now Carelon Behavioral Health. So we're the same people, just calling ourselves something a little different. But we were brought in to help support a lot of this work, and we are one of the agencies who are providing telephone, chat, and text support that folks might encounter when they reach out to a service. There are a couple of different telephonic support options for people here in New Hampshire. One is the New Hampshire Rapid Response Access Point system, which is the part that Carelon plays. The other is the 988 system, which is a much larger, broader, national level system that relies on local providers to provide support, but also has a broader national footprint. And so for that system, my colleague Al here at Headrest, they are primarily the support center for that network. We at Carelon are an additional support network, support call center for that network as well. And so there is a slight difference there. The Rapid Response Access Point is essentially New Hampshire's homegrown system. We are the ones that are locally, providing resources and linkages. And then the 988 system has a kind of a larger footprint that provides local care but also has some national ties. So I know that's a little confusing, but I think as we start talking a little more about it, it'll become a little clearer. And I know Al is on and can probably share a lot more information about the 988 system from their perspective, as they're the primary answer point here in New Hampshire.
So I guess that's my cue. So basically, let me give you a quick introduction to Headrest. Headrest got its start back in the early 70s on Dartmouth campus, and there was a handful of hippies that said, hey, we need a place for people to call and come to when they're struggling. And there really wasn't anything in the Upper Valley, New Hampshire at that time. After a while, they said, wow, this is bigger than just Dartmouth campus. So they expanded and moved out into the public, and we've been basically growing ever since. Our hotline has not stopped. It's been running 24/7 since early 1971. And it's amazing what we could do. We do not necessarily fix people over the phone, but what we do is we calm them down and point them in a direction and find them whatever resources that they need. What happened, Headrest in 2005, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline was created. I believe it was right after Hurricane Katrina, and it was a national number for people to call if they were experiencing crisis or suicidality. It was called the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and Headrest joined right after it formed as the contact point for New Hampshire. At the beginning, Headrest was the only call center for New Hampshire, Vermont, and parts of Maine. The people that oversee the Lifeline have since made it so every state has their own call center, and so Headrest is New Hampshire's primary call center, but we also back up Vermont still. And what that means is anybody calling what used to be a 1-800 number now is 988. Anybody calling that number from a 603 area code will reach Headrest. And if our phone is busy, Beacon or Carillon now is the backup call center. And if for whatever reason Headrest and Carillon are busy, then that call will go into the national queue and it will be picked up by the closest available call center, so people could get help. You never receive a busy signal. You're never put on hold. It's always somebody's always there to answer. The biggest difference between 988, in my opinion anyway, between 988 and the Rapid Response Access Point is 90%, actually over 90% of our calls just require somebody to talk to. People will literally call all the time, say, I don't know if this is the right number because I'm not suicidal. And I'll say, well, it started as suicide prevention hotline, so let's keep you from getting there. If somebody needs more help than we could do over the phone, we now have Carillon to go to. Whereas it used to be, all we had was a couple of different mobile crisis units in New Hampshire, or we had 911. So now what has happened with 988, I got to give the state of New Hampshire a lot of credit for taking charge and doing this. What it's done is it's developed a whole system to help people, and it truly is a real continuum of care that people will go through either Headrest or Carillon And if need be, they get forwarded on to the mobile crisis teams in the community mental health centers.
Perfect. Thank you, Al. How about if we bounce back to Eric? You have some slides to sort of walk us through the process now that we know about the different companies and what you do.
I do. Let me get that ready for you. Oh. Let's do that in presentation mode so it's full screen. That didn't do what I wanted it to. Let me try sharing a different screen. Sorry, everybody.
We will wait patiently.
Yeah. Don't you love watching people struggle with tech issues in the middle of a webinar? Here we go. All right, now it's set up properly. I just did things out of order. Come on. There we go. Okay. So I do have a couple of slides, and bear with me because I recognize that some of what I'm about to talk about gets a little complicated in the weeds. So I want to just reassure folks that the experience that you have is intended to be really seamless and really helpful. You don't need to know the information I'm about to tell you in order to be able to access the service. You don't need to understand it fully is what I'll say. And also the slide that I'm about to explain to you is going to be available for you to have as a to review on your own and kind of go over it a little bit. But first of all, before we go into it, I want to clarify how people can reach out to the Rapid Response Access Point service. So the service does offer 3 different methods of support. We offer telephone, text, and chat support. And if you want to reach out specifically to the Access Point service, you can see the phone number here, 833-710-6477. That's the same number that you would call for telephonic support or text if you wanted to text for support. Excuse me. In addition to that, if you're interested in chatting online, you can visit nh988.com and select the Chat Now option. So we will provide support to you in any of these 3 methods that you prefer. To be very clear, even though we will ask a lot of information such as name, date of birth, address, all that stuff, understand that all that information is optional. And if you choose not to share something, if you're uncomfortable sharing something, we will still talk to you, text with you, chat with you, and provide you support. So I do want to reassure folks that we are a confidential service, and so we will engage with you in the way that you prefer to engage. So now that you know how to access care, and understand as well, as we mentioned before, that in addition to people who reach out via this channel, there also is the 988 channel, and we do receive some calls from the 988 channel if Headrest is unable to provide support to everyone who's reaching out via that method. So it is possible that if you dial 988, you might reach our call center as well. And this is the workflow that we follow for any person that reaches us, regardless of how you access our care. This is the workflow for us. And so if you look left, the process goes kind of left to right on your screen. You'll notice that the person reaching out can reach out via any of the 3 methods. And when you do so, you engage with one of our crisis specialists. Each of our crisis specialists has the education and training to deal with crisis situations, to support people through those situations, to help assess your needs, to help collaborate with you, join with you, and help you understand what your options are. The service that we provide is aligned with a person-centered approach. And so we are not there to dictate to you what we believe you should do. We are there to explain to you what the options are within the system and have you understand them and make that decision for yourself so that you're able to choose how you engage with the system and how you receive support. In addition to education and training, a lot of our call taking staff also have personal lived experience. We do have some people who are certified as peers, but we also have other people who are not necessarily certified as peers, but do have lived experience with crisis themselves or with friends, family members, or other loved ones who might have gone through crisis. So our staff has a variety of expertise, training, and education that really provides them with the skills they need to be able to support folks, de-escalate folks who are in crisis, and also identify the needs and how we're able to meet those needs. I'll mention that something like 90% of people who call them are able to be de-escalated without anything further. We're de-escalating about 75% of all people who reach out to us purely with just that telephone, text, or chat contact. And so fully 75% of people who reach out to us, we are the only intervention that they require. We might provide them with some local resources or explain to them what their local options are, but at the end of that contact, they feel that their crisis has been resolved sufficiently enough that they don't require further intervention. In addition to that, however, we are able, if you move on to the next box, we are able to make referrals to different levels of care. And so of the remaining 25% of folks who do feel like they need something extra, we're able to link to referrals for urgent appointments with the local mental health centers in some cases, if that's appropriate. We are also able to link people to a mobile crisis response. And so we do have rapid response mobile teams who will deploy to the community, to a person's home, sometimes to a workplace, sometimes to a hospital. We also serve schools, jails, basically almost any place you can imagine that we can safely arrange for a meeting. Mobile will respond. Now there is, some level of table setting that we have to do for the mobile team. We will ask some questions, and at that point we do need to know an address because we need to know where the team needs to respond. We do want to be sure we've asked some questions around safety. So we're going to, in order to try to protect the team's safety and the person's safety who is in crisis, we're going to ask questions about the surroundings, the circumstances, things that are going on in that environment to be sure that we're providing the right information to be able to properly support safety. The majority of our interactions occur without any type of law enforcement or EMS involvement, but that is always kind of a backup option if there is some issue with us being able to link to a mobile team, or if the mobile team needs some added support for safety on scene, they can co-respond with law enforcement or EMS in those cases where safety requires it. Again, that represents a small portion of the total response that the mobile teams are providing, and a very small portion of the response that we are providing. If you look at our call volume, we're only engaging with 911 2% or less of the time for everyone that reaches out to us. Once you've received a referral, either for an appointment or for a mobile deployment, then what happens at that point with the field interventions box is that you're going to receive services in person at the appointment, or you're going to receive services most likely in person from mobile. Occasionally they might intervene with you virtually, and they will work through what it is that your needs are and help you understand your available services and get you linked to the proper care. Again, hospitalization is an option if that is what is appropriate, but a lot of work is done to make sure that we've exhausted all alternatives before we move to that level of care. And then following that engagement with us and or with mobile, there is a follow-up process where we want to be sure that following our intervention, whether that be the intervention purely of the access point or of access point and mobile, we want to be sure that you still are feeling that your crisis has been resolved in that moment, that the support that you received from us was appropriate, and that you have received appropriate services and resources to support you through that crisis. And so we're just checking up on you. Everything okay? Did what we do work for you? Do you need some more support? Do we need to re-engage with you? Or do you feel like, you're good for now and you'll let us know the next time you need some help? So we do have that follow-up process in place. We believe that that is a really important part of the process because we want to kind of put a bow on the encounter, so to speak, and make sure that we've really tied up that loose end and make sure that you're not kind of left hanging on out there wondering what your next step is or feeling like you didn't really get everything that you needed. So that's basically the process that we have here at Carillon. Almost said Beacon. It's a hard habit to get out of. And again, anyone that reaches our call center, contact center is going to receive that same experience, whether they're reaching us through the 988 system or by directly dialing the rapid response access point system.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Al, how about differences between your system and Eric's?
Well, basically, They're the same but different. We have trained crisis counselors who will talk to people, de-escalate whatever situation there is. Try to find out what resources the person already has, what resources they're looking for, and we will do our best to deal with the situation over the phone. If that doesn't work for whatever reason, or the person needs more assistance, we will, and quite frequently we do, refer people and transfer people over to the mobile crisis, the rapid response access point, and we let them make the determination whether or not a mobile crisis team is needed, or kind of take it from there.
This is the no wrong door, right? We haven't mentioned that yet today, but that was the push, was to recognize that if you call 988 or the access point number, there is no wrong door, you're going to get help.
Yeah.
So
A lot of people call 988 expecting rapid response access point. And our crisis counselors will say, oh, hold on a minute, we'll get you right there.
great. Eric, can you, terminology here, rapid response access point, can you unpack that for us?
Yes. So the reason that we're called the rapid response access point is that we are the way that people access rapid response, and rapid response are the mobile teams. So sometimes I will say the whole mouthful and call the mobile teams a rapid response mobile team, to be sure that people understand that's what we mean when we say rapid response here in New Hampshire. That's one of those things that's not kind of universalized state to state. Some states call it one thing, some states call it another. And so here in New Hampshire, we're kind of using a bit of both. And so I often will just say the rapid response mobile teams, which are the people who actually respond. Those are operated by your local community mental health centers. And then the rapid response access point is our contact center, which operates the call, text, and chat support, and can link to a rapid response mobile team if that is the appropriate linkage for that person.
So are we changing the name from mobile crisis response team to a rapid response mobile team?
Kimberly, I don't know. You're a provider, so I don't know if you've gotten clear direction from on that particular point. I believe the language has just been kind of a little muddled, honestly, under the new system.
Yeah, and I very much do the same thing as you, Eric, where I refer to us and make sure, especially when talking about it initially with people, that I identify both names and let people know that those are the same things. You may hear it by different names, but it is the same thing.
Great. So Eric, can we now include Kimberly into the conversation? Somebody calls, gets your services, and you say, okay, we're going to deploy mobile response. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So I'll start, and then Kimberly can obviously pick up. But when we engage with someone and we identify with that person that a mobile deployment is kind of the best option in that moment, what we will then do is we will use the dispatching software that we use. We will take the location that the person has provided us, and we will plug that into our software, and it will tell us with a live map where the responders in the state are. And so we are able to see in real time, oh, you might be in downtown Concord, and there happens to be a responder who looks like about 10 miles away. I'm going to reach out to that team, let them know that you're in need, where you are, what's going on, and they should be, connecting with you shortly. We will do everything that we can. And this is actually a question from Mitchell. I believe it's Mitchell in the Q&A about timing. And so we do everything we can to identify a team who's able to respond in about an hour to a person's location. There is also sometimes the option of providing a virtual response, which is a little more difficult because you have to be sure that the person has, the appropriate equipment to do a virtual response. They're willing to do it virtually, that their needs can appropriately be served via a virtual encounter. And that's not always the case. So given kind of that decision-making process, we will do everything we can to identify a team who can respond in about an hour. If we can't identify a team who can respond in about an hour, either in person or virtually, we will discuss with them alternatives. And unfortunately, sometimes that alternative might include an emergency department referral for that person's safety. It's not ideal, it's not what we want, but that is unfortunately sometimes the option that is the safest option given the limited resources that that we have. So once we've made the decision to dispatch, we send the request out via the software to the mobile team, and I'll let Kimberly pick up from there because she can tell you what happens on her end.
You're muted, Kimberly.
You would think after this long, I'd get it. So I did a workflow, but it's not as pretty as Eric, so I'm not going to pull it up right now. But basically, once we get that dispatch, the dispatch includes a lot of information about the situation, what is going on with the person that we are going to see. We look that over, we accept the dispatch, and then the team kind of gets into go mode. That means that once we've accepted that dispatch, we give the patient or the person who made that original call to the access point a call ourselves, just to let them know what our timeline is to get there, so they have an idea of when we're going to be showing up, and who's going to be showing up, because we don't want to surprise anybody. And we also kind of double check the information that we've received from the access point, make sure there hasn't been any changes in the time that they get off the phone versus when we actually contact the patient. And once that's all assured and there's no situation where we need to contact EMS or police or anything like that, if that's not the case, then we end up wherever the patient is. And I say wherever the patient is because a lot of times we think of us going to their homes, but that may not necessarily be the case. We're going to go to wherever that patient is within the community, as long as it's a safe setting, which leads to a lot more availability for patients to be able to be seen by us. So it could be the patient's home, it could be a school, it could be the police station, it could be the marshal's parking lot, because that's where the patient is. And our goal is to, not make this any more stressful for the patients than they're already, in at that moment, dealing with a mental health crisis. So whatever works for them in that moment. So our team is going to show up and see the patient, and the team is going to consist of a master's level clinician. So that'll be somebody who has a degree in some mental health field and has done crisis work before. And then a peer support specialist. And we've had some talk about peers during this so far, but just in case anybody doesn't know what that is somebody with lived experience. So somebody who's been through the mental health system themselves in most cases. So those two folks are going to show up and they are going to provide evaluation and support for that patient. So evaluation will be based on any safety needs. So we're going to, if the patient is dealing with suicidality, we're going to, assess for suicidality, homicidality, we're going to assess for that, psychosis, those types of things. And then in support, we're going to see what is going on with this patient, maybe besides those direct things that they're discussing right now, like the suicidality, that may be impacting those symptoms. So is there anything else that we can assist that patient with in that moment to either reduce those symptoms, support them in that moment, or determine what the next best steps are? And when we are determining next best steps, we are looking at a couple different options. So if the patient is an acute need for or acutely suicidal, let's say, and is unable to be in the community and be safe because of that, then we will assist them in getting inpatient mental health treatment. And we can do that one of two ways. Either, if somebody's willing and able to consent to that treatment, we will help them with a voluntary hospitalization. If they are unable to consent or do not, we determine that they're a safety, that there's safety needs and the patient doesn't agree, we may have to look at an involuntary hospitalization, which is always our last resort. And our goal and our most likely outcome, this is what happens most of the time for us, is that that patient remains in the community with ongoing supports from the local community mental health center. So we can either support them by making appointments for them for up to 30 days if that's their need, and help them get through that crisis that they're in during that time. Sometimes the situation is resolved after meeting with us, and we don't have to do that follow-up care. Although generally, most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, we are going to meet with that patient at least one more time after that initial crisis. So we will provide those services ongoing. We can, again, continue to do that out in the community if that's what works for that patient. Eric briefly spoke about telehealth or, meeting with somebody virtually. And we can also do that if that's the best option for that patient. And they also have the option to come into our office and meet with us there. Now they can meet with either our clinicians or our peer supports, depending on what their needs are. We want to make sure it's the best fit for that patient. So if they, don't need to speak with a clinician, but they need support in, learning some coping skills, the peer might be the best option for them in that moment. And then Eric also mentioned those urgent appointments. So I would say that's where we see most of our patients are through those urgent appointments. So those are patients that called into the access point and did not need the deployment of a mobile crisis team at that moment, but did need follow-up services quickly. So we will schedule those appointments within 48 hours for a clinician to see those patients. And again, can be done in the community, in our office, whatever works for that patient. And we will follow that patient for up to 30 days to assure that they have those supports that they need.
Great, thank you for that. A couple of questions have come in. What happens when a community mental health center that is contacted cannot accept the patient? There are waiting lists, right? We hear this all the time. I can't get in for 6 months.
Mm-hmm. So again, that's oftentimes why we are allowed those up to 30 days of support for that patient. And I can't speak for every community mental health center, but within that 30 days, we are usually able to assist the patient enough that if they need to wait to get further services, they're in a place that they can do that. If they are not, then we will work with that patient to figure out services for them.
So if folks are struggling and they can't get into a community mental health center, calling the access point and getting connected in some way is a good thing to do?
I mean, it's one avenue. It's, one way of us getting those services to those patients in need.
Okay. An anonymous attendee says, do all the community mental health centers have active mobile crisis teams? Are they available 24/7? I realize there's a workforce issue and wonder if that is impacting availability of mobile crisis teams.
Yeah, so all 10 community mental health centers around the state, we're charged with beginning mobile crisis starting a month and two, or a year and 2 months ago, I think Eric said. So January 1st of 2022. And all 10 mental health centers have implemented that. You're absolutely right. There is a workforce issue. So every center does everything they can to staff 24/7. And I cannot, like I said, speak for other centers, but I do know that everybody is doing pretty well with fully covering those hours.
Okay, great. And Thomas asks, how will the recent court decision about boarding impact the rapid response system and efforts to avoid hospitalization?
Well, I would say that, sorry, Eric, I saw you.
I just felt like you were bearing a lot of the weight I wanted to share, but you go ahead and I will jump in after you.
So I can't really speak for the impact. I would say that our goal is always to see patients in the community if we are able to, if it's a safe situation, if the patient is in is not in medical or critical danger at that moment. We would much rather see patients in the community and be able to assess them in a place that is more comfortable, a lot of times feels safer for them, and doesn't feel like they, I don't think anybody enjoys a trip to the emergency department. So if we can see patients in the community, we would always want to. So I can't speak for how it's going to change things, except for that's always been our goal in the first place.
Yeah, that's really all I was going to say was, I mean, as far as how it's going to impact our system, it's very complicated and difficult to anticipate that. But that is, in fact, the whole goal of the crisis system is to do everything we can to reduce referrals to hospitals, medical facilities, to reduce the involvement of law enforcement, EMS, other non-mental health professionals who often are called upon to support people in crisis. So I think the system is already working toward that goal. As far as how we will respond specifically to the new court decision, I think that's the question really for the HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, to answer and to direct us as their contractors.
Thank you. We do have some questions coming in that are specifically about Carelon. So I am entering email addresses. So if you have a question specific for Eric, that is his email address. Same for Kimberly and for Al. So we would encourage you to reach out to those people directly with those organization-specific questions. We do have a question from a family member. This is from Pam. What is the criteria for a family member or support person making the call? There's been controversy around this.
So welcome my assistant, everyone. This is Charlie. So there is no criteria per se. I mean, anyone can call the number for support for yourself, for a friend, family member, loved one. There is no criteria per se as to what that looks like. Now, I think the larger question that is probably behind your question is, what are the options for a third party, an interested loved one, family member who wants to call about a person in crisis? And the response is that can become a little complicated at times, right? Because obviously, if we want to link a person to care, and we're talking about a person-centered approach to that care, the ideal is that the person who wants the services would be involved in that conversation. But we also recognize that there are times when some people have reached a point that they are unable to make perhaps the best decisions in a particular moment. And so we will work with that family member, that friend, to explore what the options are and to help direct them to the appropriate care. It is possible, and I'm saying this in front of Kimberly, who's a mobile provider. So it is possible for us to make a decision to dispatch a mobile team without the express consent of the person for whom we are dispatching the team, right? There will be a lot more safety questions in that particular instance because we want to see, we need to better understand what the scenario is, what the circumstances are, what the person's behavior is, what the environment is like. Is there another person there who knows that we're coming, who can help facilitate that encounter? Because we don't want to create a situation where a mobile team is basically put in a spot to surprise a person who might already be in crisis. And, we're not really sure what that reaction might be. So we don't want to create a situation that could trigger an unsafe situation. So we're gonna ask a lot more questions and try to be sure that we can offer that support in the safest way possible. It is not impossible for us to dispatch mobile without the person knowing about it, but it does come with kind of a higher level of scrutiny. And so if we feel that we can't safely do that, we might direct you to alternatives for intervention. But we're not going to leave you completely hanging. We're going to explain to you, like, it's not going to be just like, it should never be, no, we can't do that for you. It should be, well, in order for us to do that for you, let's talk about what would have to happen, right? So it should not just be a no, end of sentence. It should be, let me figure out how we can help you, right? These are the extra things. Let me talk through that with you. So that's the intention of our folks.
And if a family member, hello, Charlie, if a family member wants a mobile crisis team to come, that is our intention. We need a mobile crisis team. Just expressly say that.
That's helpful, because then that will trigger us to start having that conversation and to say, all right, these are the things that we like to have in place to make a mobile dispatch. If something is missing, how can we accommodate that? How can we get what we need to make sure the team can respond safely? So yes, that will trigger that conversation. And more often than not, we will find a way to get a mobile team to you safely. But that safety is the priority. And so, we just want to be sure that we have certain things in place to make sure that that response is going to be helpful for everyone and not put anyone at undue risk.
And I think a point to be made is that what a family might consider a safety risk and what the clinicians on the other end of the phone consider an unsafe situation might be different. I have heard from family members saying they wouldn't send anyone out. And if I dig a little deeper, it comes down to safety, that the person assessing, the clinician on the end of the phone, is saying this isn't a safe situation for us to send someone into. And that can be hard for families to hear because they don't want to call law enforcement. Yeah. We know that thousands of people have been helped. What are the statistics, Eric?
Let's see, in 2022, we conducted about 22,200 crisis contacts. And that means that about 22,200 times, and this is just for Carillon. So this is in addition to work that Headrest has done, which is even more. But 22,200 times we were able to coach someone through a crisis episode and provide them with some level of care. We deployed mobile crisis more than 7,000 times in 2022. And so, we were able to provide assistance to a significant number of folks.
And this is a new system over the course of a year, right? This is, 14 months now we're in. There's an anonymous attendee who says that they've had to call multiple times for issues with their children and are saying they were having trouble being able to speak with someone, that someone would not be able to get to us for at least a couple of hours and we're not local. And this person asked, what is being done to increase the workforce with these delays that folks are experiencing?
I want to address part of that because it sounds like you weren't able to reach someone. And I want to be sure that I understand what was behind that. In order to do that, I would need to connect with you to kind of get some more information. So if you're comfortable doing that, I would ask that you connect with me directly through my email. And let me know if we can investigate that, because I really do genuinely want to understand what the barrier is to you getting through to us. That should not be a barrier. We should be able to reach you. So if you're comfortable doing that, I would ask that you reach out to me directly and we can discuss that and research that. As far as workforce, Kimberly, you probably have a lot more to say about that, because I think it's a question about mobile workforce.
I mean, I'm welcoming ideas on how to increase our workforce. I would say that the agency I work for is more equipped in our mobile department than a lot of other community mental health agencies. And I'm very lucky to be able to say that. However, I don't know of a silver bullet there. You know, I don't know anything that's going to check that box and make sure that we always have the amount of clinicians and peers that we need. And it's a struggle. It's really great that we all have dedicated teams that are willing to pitch in and sometimes do a little bit extra to make sure that everybody in the state can get the support that they need.
Right, and we do know that statewide, they're looking at this issue, so there is a real push to increase the workforce, so there is work being done. There are groups that are meeting to specifically address the workforce issue, because we're all well aware that it's a problem, a very large problem. Tanya asks, have we provided this information to the homelessness support agencies? I happened to volunteer at a cold weather shelter and they had no knowledge of 988 until I provided information. They had used 911 exclusively when a guest needed immediate support. How are we getting the word out?
So everybody is doing a little piece of that. I know that from Beacon's perspective, we have liaisons who go out in the community and engage with a variety of folks, school personnel, law enforcement personnel, social services organizations, including shelters and those types of agencies. And so we are out there doing that work. I'm sure Kimberly, Al, you probably both do similar work in your own communities. And also DHHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, has recently opened a contract with a marketing agency to provide a broader statewide marketing campaign to encourage folks to use the service and educate the general public. I'll have to defer to DHHS to comment more on that, but I just want to make people aware that there is a broader marketing campaign coming.
That is good to know. I'm going to backtrack here because there was a question about the mobile crisis team being unavailable in that area, and one of the attendees felt that the question hadn't been answered. What happens when a specific catchment mobile crisis team is unavailable to that area? How does someone get seen for mobile?
So we can actually, I'm sorry, Kimberly.
No, you go for it.
So we can actually ask mental health centers to come into neighboring catchment areas. So when we are looking for a response, we're looking for the closest person. I mean, we are looking first of all in region, in catchment, so to speak. But if for some reason, maybe Kimberly's teams are all engaged, maybe they're having a particularly busy day, and they just don't have a person available at, let's just say 2 p.m. on a Friday, because it happens to be a busy day. When we look at in our software at the MAP, we will look at resources outside of that catchment who might be within driving distance of about an hour. So we can borrow from perhaps possibly in that case, Riverbend or one of the other providers who might have a team available to respond in that area. And again, we can consider the option of having a virtual responder. And that virtual responder could literally be from anywhere in the state because they're going to be sitting in their office, engaging with you via computer, if that option is appropriate given your particular situation. So we will borrow resources from other catchments if that's appropriate and if it helps us get the response that we need. Even with that option, there are some times when the whole system is simply burdened to a point where there's not a person available in that moment. And we will do everything we can to identify an alternative. Someone asked another question as well about if we are referring people to an ER, is there a process? And so when we refer someone to an ER, we do have a follow-up process in place. And if we are following up with that person and it gets to be maybe they're like changing their mind or they're delaying going to the hospital, in that follow-up process, we can always amend that plan of care. We can always say, well, now, it's been an hour. Let me look back and see if there's a mobile team available now. Like we can do that again, so we can check. Obviously, we don't want to delay care, but if for whatever reason there's been some sort of time lapse, we can certainly reconsider and we can check that out again. So we're doing all we can to try to get folks connected to the right resource, even like I said, kind of being agnostic to catchment when it's appropriate.
Thank you. There is a question here about prayer and complaint and prayer paperwork. So getting someone involuntarily admitted. Previously, the local mental health centers would help family members as rapid response the group to direct families to. We've had outpatient therapists at my organization say they would call rapid response asking for assistance. And when they've done that, it will take some time to get it done.
Yes, so, and I'll speak specifically for my agency, although I do know that some of the other agencies are very much equipped to do this as well. So if somebody needs assistance in completing complaint and prayer, and in addition to that, you would always have IEA paperwork or involuntary emergency admission paperwork. We are absolutely able to help with that. We do get dispatches specifically to help people in completing that paperwork. Depending on their level of need, it may be something that we help that person over the phone with, have them come into the office, or if they need us to come out into the community, that is sometimes also available. As far as, and I'm not sure exactly what the question was specifically asking, because I do know that when you complete a complaint and prayer, you need a signature of a justice of the peace. So I'm wondering if that's a part of what you're looking for as well. I do know that a lot of the community mental health agencies, including ours, has multiple justice of the peace on staff that can sign that paperwork if needed.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. Is there a protocol for responding to a homeless person?
So there's not, I would say there's a protocol to respond to just about any person out there who needs us. And being homeless is certainly something to consider, but it's not an exclusionary criteria for, I'm assuming people are asking for a mobile response. There will be additional questions we will ask. When you have someone responding to a house, it's pretty easy to say, here's the address, this is where you need to go. But when you have someone who might be unhoused, then we're gonna get some more details, like, can you give us a little description? What are you wearing today? I'm the guy who's going to be in the red hoodie, right? Like, or I'll be standing on the corner of, I don't know, 3rd and Main, whatever the intersection might be. We're going to need to get some really specific details because we don't have that concrete address necessarily. Sometimes we might, but in cases where we don't, we just need to be sure the teams have what they need to be able to respond. You don't want a team kind of walking around a location and saying, hey, did you call for a mobile team? That's not really in anyone's best interest. So there will be some increased questions to lay the scene for the response, but we can absolutely dispatch to see someone who is unhoused.
Herbert asks, he says, we manage a community residence housing individuals with severe and persistent mental health challenges. Can we obtain mobile crisis on behalf of a resident?
Absolutely.
I was in the middle of typing a response. Go ahead, Kimberly.
I mean, that's what it is. If they are having a mental health crisis, that it goes through the same access point triage. And if they determine that somebody needs to go out, then we'll respond wherever we need to.
And I think this would harken back to Pam's question about a family member reaching out and wanting a team to be deployed, right? But the person can't consent. They're not going to consent. They're in crisis, which is why the call is being made. That team will indeed get dispatched if the need is there, correct?
It's actually easier for us to dispatch in that scenario to a place like a residential setting because there is at least some structure in place. There are some professional staff available to provide for safety. So that would actually be a situation where it's a little easier to make that happen. That's the kind of thing that we would be looking for to be able to dispatch without the individual's consent is, are there other people around to provide or support safety to support this encounter? So that, yeah, that would actually be an easier way to dispatch to someone without their personal consent.
That's good information. Thank you for that. Robin asks, as an outreach worker, I've been in a few situations where I was instructing school providers how and when to access 988. Is there a plan to offer school and other community-based organizations with a basic training?
So I will say for my area that we have gone out into the community initially prior to rapid response starting, and we are kind of doing a second round now that we've been doing this for a year for any agency, school, police department, anywhere that we can get that information out and kind of do a follow-up, or sometimes it hasn't gotten to them and we do initial information. So that's definitely something that we are doing. I know, again, a lot of other community mental health agencies are doing that same thing.
Yeah, and we do our own outreach work as well. I have a couple of liaisons whose whole job is to go around the state and to build relationships and to provide trainings. So they do that basically every day. We also have been working with DHHS to try and determine a better way to kind of access the educational system from the top down. Like we're doing this very much ground up, kind of, that roots level work. And so we're reaching out to the local counselor at the school that we just engaged with. But if we could do something more top down and get this out at a broader level, I think that would be effective. And I'm hopeful that that is going to be a part of the marketing campaign that DHHS is doing as well.
I'm talking and muted. Here we go. We're coming to the end here. So what are some things that we as a community can do to help strengthen this relatively new mental health crisis response system?
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I think a rising tide raises all ships, right? Like it's kind of trite, but it's true. And so I think even if you don't have a way to support us directly, just advocating for better mental health care, better funding for mental health care, more awareness, get engaged with NAMI, get engaged with some local group or an advocacy group. Do anything you can to raise awareness and provide support in your own community. And certainly reach out to us and engage with us as you're able to do so. We're not walking around with our hand out, so I'm not going to ask people to support us financially. But I mean, there are a lot of other ways that people can kind of provide support to the broader community, I would say.
Are we on target? Are we moving in the direction we had planned on 14 months ago?
I don't want to speak on behalf of DHHS. I think they would ultimately be the person to answer that question definitively. But what I will say is that I have seen tremendous progress in the past 14 months. We've come a long way. We continue to identify areas where we can do better, and we continue to work on that and to refine our workflows and to look at our processes. We've done tremendous work as a system. Every single agency represented on this call, and even the others who are part of the system, we are in a very different place now than we were 14 months ago. And I would say, in my opinion, that is a very positive development. So that would be my assessment.
That was a good assessment. We are birthing a process here and we're moving in the right direction. And so we do want to make the point that if you have any questions, any concerns, you have the email addresses of all of the people on the call today. We do thank you for joining us. You have my email address as well. 988 and New Hampshire's Rapid Response Access Point are continuing to take care of the people we love, and we appreciate your support and all of it. So just a reminder, a recording of today's discussion will be posted on the education page of onwardnh.org. I did put that into the chat. You'll receive an email in the next few days, which will include links for the website along with an evaluation. So if you do go ahead and complete that evaluation, when it comes to you, you will automatically receive a certificate of attendance. For any questions or comments, please reach out to me at mwagner@naminh.org. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you to all of our panelists. Until we see you again, take care.